God speaks silently through your mind when most people think of hearing from God. They imagine a loud voice from the heavens or a sign written across the skies. But the greatest messages that shape our lives rarely come in thunder and lightning. They come as gentle whispers in the quiet sanctuary of our own minds. Every day, amid the noise of this world, there is a still, small voice inside of you. That voice doesn't demand attention with volume. It draws you inward with gentleness and truth. It's in those fleeting thoughts that encourage you to do right when no one is watching. It's in those subtle nudges to help someone in need. It's in that quiet conviction that tells you to stay strong, to forgive, to try again. That is God speaking, not shouting because he doesn't need to. His guidance is already woven into the fiber of your soul. The creator of the universe, who holds the stars in place, also resides in the hush between your thoughts. When you make time to listen, when you dare to silence the distractions around you and face your own heart, you will hear the most profound wisdom. Every true insight, every bold decision guided by love and compassion, every moment of knowing you're on the right path, these are the footprints of God's voice in your mind. And here's the beautiful part: the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. It grows familiar. You begin to recognize that these gentle promptings, these sparks of insight, are never random. They lead you to peace, they inspire you to grow, they encourage you to stand for what is good and true. Never underestimate the power of these silent messages. A single God-given thought can change the course of your life. A single silent word from your Creator can open a door you never even knew was there. So today, lean into the quiet. Trust that God is present even when you cannot see Him, and especially when you cannot hear Him with your ears. Trust that every good and loving thought stirring in your heart is part of a sacred conversation between you and your Maker. God speaks silently through your mind, and when you listen, you will never be led astray. The whisper that guides you in a world filled with noise, distractions, and the constant pull of urgent demands. It's easy to believe that guidance must come loudly and clearly, but often the most profound guidance doesn't come as a shout. It comes as a whisper. It's that quiet voice that speaks in the stillness of your soul. It's the gentle prompting that nudges you toward compassion, toward patience, toward a path that honors your higher purpose. This is the whisper that guides you, subtle yet powerful, soft yet unshakable. Have you ever paused to wonder where that inner voice comes from? Deep in the quiet places of your heart, you recognize that this is not just your voice. It is something deeper, wiser, more loving. Many call it conscience. Some describe it as intuition. But those who believe understand that this is the voice of God Himself, the one who created you and knows you better than you know yourself. This is His gentle whisper, lovingly guiding you along the path He designed for you before you ever took your first breath. And yet, for all its power and purpose, the whisper is easily ignored. It cannot compete with the loud roar of the world or the clamor of your fears and doubts. If you never slow down, never quiet your spirit, never lean in to listen, you can spend a lifetime missing what God is gently saying. That is why the Bible reminds us to be still and know that I am God. Only in stillness can we hear the whisper that guides. That whisper often comes when you least expect it, in the middle of your everyday life. Maybe you're driving home after a long day, and a thought surfaces, encouraging you to call someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe you feel an inexplicable sense of peace before making a difficult decision, even when logic would lead you in a different direction. Maybe you wake up one morning with a quiet conviction that it's time to leave a destructive habit behind. These are all gentle messages planted by God, drawing you closer to His will for your life. The whisper is never harsh or condemning. It doesn't tear you down or stir up chaos. It doesn't play on your fears or stir up shame. Instead, it calls you to higher places, to integrity, to love, to grace, to forgiveness. It will never contradict what is good and true. That is why it is so important to know God's character, so you recognize His voice in every gentle word. The world may tell you that you need to fight, compete, and strive to make it in life, but God's whisper reminds you that you don't need to exhaust yourself grasping for the things you desire. Instead, you need to listen and trust. Trust that He is already at work. Trust that His plan is greater than your own. Trust that when you respond to His quiet guidance, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment, you are stepping into a future prepared especially for you. That whisper might lead you to forgive someone who has hurt you, even when they don't deserve it. It might inspire you to show generosity to a stranger, even when it seems inconvenient. It might stir you to pursue a dream that feels impossible, simply because you cannot ignore the quiet conviction stirring in your soul. Following that whisper often requires courage, the kind that grows only when you listen more carefully to the voice of God and less to the noise of the world. There will be times when you hesitate to follow the whisper. After all, it rarely offers all the answers up front. It doesn't always give you a blueprint or a timeline. It asks you to trust and to take the next faithful step, even when the destination is not yet in view. But when you dare to say yes, when you trust that small voice, you will discover a life far richer and more meaningful than you could ever have created on your own. And perhaps most beautifully of all, the whisper that guides you is also the whisper that comforts you. When you feel alone, it reminds you that you never truly are. When you feel lost, it gently steers you back toward home. When you feel burdened, it offers rest and assurance. God's voice is not reserved for grand mountaintop revelations. It is present in the quiet places of your heart, every single day, leading you one peaceful thought at a time. So the question is not whether God is still speaking. The question is whether we are still listening. The world will always be loud, but you can choose to grow quiet, make space in your day for silence, let go of the constant noise and distractions, tune your heart to the subtle impressions that come when you pause long enough to truly hear. When you embrace this practice, you'll find that the whisper that guides you is never far away. It is as close as your next breath. It is as near as the prayer you offer in the quiet of your soul. And every time you listen and respond, you will come to know that this whisper is not only leading you, it is also holding you, loving you, and bringing you safely home. Divine truths in quiet moments in a world that celebrates noise, movement, and constant doing. It can feel counterintuitive to embrace stillness. Every day, we're bombarded with messages telling us to do more, be more, achieve more. But if you look closely at your own life at the moments when you feel most grounded and most at peace, you'll notice a common thread. In those times, you weren't rushing or worrying. You were simply still. In those quiet spaces, you encountered divine truths that no amount of striving could ever reveal. It is in those hushed, sacred pauses that God speaks most clearly. These are the divine truths in quiet moments, truths that steady your heart, realign your soul, and illuminate the path ahead. Consider the simple beauty of a sunrise before the world is fully awake, or the gentle rhythm of your breath when you close your eyes and truly feel yourself breathe. Consider the sound of rain as it taps against a window, or the softness of a prayer whispered into the silence. In these quiet places, God often speaks without words. His presence is felt as a deep assurance that you are loved, that you matter, that you are held. But if we never make room for stillness, we may never truly hear. Too often, we wait for God to speak through grand signs or miraculous events. And while He certainly can, God also delights in meeting us where we least expect, in the quiet and the ordinary. Sometimes all it takes is one deep breath, one peaceful morning, one surrendered thought for a divine truth to rise gently to the surface of your heart. And what are these divine truths that emerge when we slow down enough to listen? They are the kind of profound realizations that don't come through intellect alone, but through soul, deep knowing. Truths like, you are enough even when you feel inadequate, that your past mistakes don't define you, and your future is held safely in God's hands. That you do not need to control every outcome because the one who created the universe already has a plan. That in every hardship there is an opportunity for grace. That in every ending there is a new beginning unfolding just beyond your view. These are not lessons you'll fully grasp while rushing through life. They require quiet reflection. They require making time to simply be, to put down your phone, to close the door, to breathe deeply and listen for that small, steady voice in your soul. And here is a beautiful truth. These moments don't require perfection. They don't require long retreats or hours spent in deep meditation. God can speak to you in a few quiet moments during your commute, as you watch your children play, or as you sip a cup of tea at the end of a long day. What matters most is your openness, a willing heart ready to receive whatever divine whispers come. When you practice creating these pockets of silence, even for a few minutes each day, you'll find that your sense of God's presence grows. You'll begin to recognize the gentle way His Spirit nudges you toward patience when you'd rather react in anger, toward generosity when you'd rather hold back, toward forgiveness when you'd rather hold on to resentment. These whispers are invitations to live more like Him, to let His character shape your thoughts and actions, one quiet moment at a time. And just as a candle shines brighter in a dark room, these divine truths glow more vividly when you quiet the noise around you. Silence gives them room to grow. Silence reveals what truly matters. That's why, in the most powerful stories of faith, you see men and women stepping away into solitude. Jesus Himself often withdrew to quiet places to pray. The Psalms speak of being still and knowing that He is God. The great prophets heard God in a whisper, not a thunderstorm. Again and again, we're reminded that God's most powerful revelations rarely come through the noise of crowds, but through the softness of our own hearts leaning toward Him. Imagine what could happen if you gave yourself that gift, if you created even a small sanctuary of quiet in your daily life. Imagine waking up a few minutes earlier simply to sit in peace before the world begins. Imagine closing your eyes during a stressful moment and whispering, "Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening." Imagine walking through your day not as someone rushed and overwhelmed, but as someone grounded in the gentle truth that God is present and active in every moment. This is what happens when you embrace the divine truths in quiet moments. You begin to live more deeply. You begin to trust more fully. You begin to feel less driven by fear and more guided by a peace that passes all understanding. And over time, these divine whispers grow louder than all the world's noise. They become your compass, your comfort, and your strength. Even when life is chaotic around you, you can return to those quiet places in your soul and listen once again. The voice of God, steady and true, will always be there. So tonight, tomorrow morning, or in the middle of your busiest day, make space for a quiet moment. Let yourself breathe. Let yourself listen. Let the divine truths that have been waiting rise up in your heart. And as they do, may you carry them with you into every part of your life, knowing that God is near, speaking softly, and guiding you every step of the way. Listening beyond the noise of life, we live in a world that never truly goes quiet. Everywhere we turn, there are voices clamoring for our attention: news broadcasts, phone notifications, social media feeds, advertisements, the expectations of others, and the constant inner chatter of our own minds. The noise of life can feel endless, drowning out the deeper, more meaningful voice that is trying to speak to us. And yet, there is a different way to live, a way that invites us to listen beyond the noise of life, to discover the wisdom, peace, and guidance that can only be heard when we dare to become still. When we allow ourselves to sink beneath the surface of the constant noise, we realize that life is more than the sum of its distractions. Beneath the clamor lies a gentle voice that reminds us who we truly are and who we are becoming. It is the voice of conscience, the voice of purpose, and most profoundly the voice of God, who speaks softly into our hearts. But to hear it, we must be willing to stop, to breathe, and to listen. And as you embrace this practice of listening, you will also begin to hear the quiet nudges that guide you toward a more meaningful life. Perhaps you will sense a gentle call to forgive someone who hurt you, or to offer kindness where it's least expected. Perhaps you will feel a renewed sense of purpose in your work, or discover a forgotten passion that longs to be revived. These are the kinds of divine invitations that surface only when we dare to listen. That is why every one of us must make time for this sacred practice. Even 5 minutes of listening can recenter your heart and renew your spirit. Even 5 minutes can shift your perspective and make room for grace. The noise of life will not disappear overnight, and the demands of your day will not vanish. But by choosing to listen, you create a sanctuary, a quiet inner sanctuary that cannot be shaken by the noise outside. And as you grow in this practice, you will discover that listening beyond the noise of life is not just a habit. It becomes a way of being. It shapes how you move through your days more grounded, more present, more attuned to what truly matters. It empowers you to respond with wisdom instead of reacting in haste. It reminds you that even in the most chaotic circumstances, there is always a quiet place in your soul where God's voice can be heard. So I encourage you, today and every day, to embrace the quiet. Step away from the noise and distractions long enough to truly listen. When God speaks without words, we often assume that if God is going to speak to us, it will be loud and clear, a booming voice from the sky, or an obvious sign we cannot miss. But so often, God speaks without words. Instead of thunder, we receive gentle whispers. Instead of a bold message written in the clouds, we feel a quiet stirring in our hearts. It is in these sacred, silent spaces that God reaches us most profoundly, not through noise, but through presence. When God speaks without words, we begin to recognize that communication is not always about language. It is about connection. It is about God drawing near to us in ways that bypass the limits of human vocabulary. Perhaps you've experienced this in a breathtaking sunset that left you speechless. Maybe you felt it in the sound of gentle rain, washing away worry and fear. Or perhaps it was in the kind smile of a stranger when you most needed a reminder that you're not alone. That is God, speaking without words, showing you that you matter, that you are seen, that you are loved. And the truth is, these moments happen every day, though we often rush past them. Our world is loud, and most of the time we are too busy to notice the subtle ways God is reaching out to us. But when we learn to slow down and truly pay attention, we discover that God is present in everything. His voice is in the way the morning light glows through your window. It is in the laughter of someone you love. It is in the gentle peace that settles over you when you take a deep breath after a long, difficult day. Think about the times when someone has comforted you not with advice, but with their quiet presence. Perhaps you were mourning a loss or going through a trial, and someone simply sat with you, held your hand, or embraced you in silence. No words were needed in that moment, because the presence itself communicated care, compassion, and strength. This is one of the most powerful ways God speaks too, by simply being with you, surrounding you with His unfailing love even when there are no words. When God speaks without words, it can also come as a quiet certainty, a deep knowing that you are held and guided. Even if you cannot see the full path ahead, it's that sense of peace that settles into your heart when you finally choose to trust Him, even though all your questions are not yet answered. This is His way of saying, you don't need to see every step, just take the next one, and I will go with you. And so much of our spiritual life is built on these unspoken communications. Prayer, for example, is not merely about the words we say to God, but about the sacred exchange that happens as we simply sit before Him, hands open, hearts yielded, ready to receive whatever He wants to give. Even in our silence, God is speaking. Even when we feel empty of words, God is present. Even when all we can do is cry or wait or wonder, God is working. When God speaks without words, He is inviting you into a deeper trust. Trust that He is close even when you cannot hear Him. Trust that His guidance is present even when the road ahead is unclear. Trust that His love is real even when you cannot feel it. That trust will change the way you live, because you will begin to walk with a sense of security that doesn't depend on what you see or hear, but on what you know to be true, that God is with you always. And so, my encouragement to you today is this: make room in your life for those quiet, wordless encounters. Set aside time to simply be with God, without feeling like you must fill the silence. Pay attention to the beauty around you, the beauty of nature, of people, of the fleeting, sacred moments that happen every day. In those times of stillness, you will discover that God has been speaking all along, not with words, but with a presence so strong and gentle that it reaches the very core of who you are. When God speaks without words, you may not always understand everything immediately. That's okay. Trust that what your soul receives in those moments will bear fruit in time, guiding you, comforting you, and helping you grow. God's silent speech is not absence. It is a deeper kind of nearness, one that reminds you that you never walk alone. And when you embrace that truth, your heart will become more attuned to His gentle voice. You will recognize Him in the ordinary and the extraordinary, in the days that feel easy and the nights that feel long. And you will know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that when God speaks without words, He is telling you in countless quiet ways, "I am here, I see you, I love you." Trusting the voice within your heart in the rush and noise of everyday life, it's easy to overlook the quiet voice within your heart. The world around you is loud, full of opinions, expectations, fears, and distractions. Every day, someone or something is telling you what you should do, who you ought to be, and where you need to go. But if you truly want to live a meaningful and authentic life, one that reflects your unique purpose, you must learn to listen and trust the voice that speaks from within. That inner voice is a gift. It's not simply your conscience, nor is it fleeting emotion. It's deeper than that. It's where God places His gentle guidance. It's where your true self longs to emerge. Trusting the voice within your heart means believing that you are created with intention and purpose, and that the Creator still speaks to you today, often in quiet, subtle ways that require patience and faith to discern. And yet, one of the most difficult things to do is to trust this inner voice. Why? Because we live in a world that often rewards logic, control, and certainty. Trusting the voice within your heart requires you to step into the unknown. It asks you to take steps that may not fit the expectations of others or follow a conventional path. It calls you to believe that there is a greater plan at work, one you cannot always see, but can sense if you lean in close enough to listen. Trusting the voice within your heart also means knowing when to wait. Sometimes the most powerful act of trust is patience. The world tells us that we must move quickly, that we need instant answers and results, but often God's timing is not rushed. The voice within will sometimes tell you to pause, to be still, and to wait for the right moment. And though this can feel difficult, especially when you want immediate clarity, trusting that inner guidance will lead you to decisions and actions that align with God's perfect timing. And when you do move, the voice within will give you courage. It will remind you that your value is not determined by your achievements or what others think of you. It will whisper that you are already enough just as you are, that you don't need to chase validation to know you matter, that you can take bold steps without fear because you walk with a strength greater than your own. And here is the beautiful promise. When you trust that voice, your life will begin to reflect the person God created you to be. Instead of feeling lost or tossed by every outside opinion, you will grow more grounded. Instead of looking outward for constant validation, you will look inward for confirmation. And as you grow in this practice, you will come to recognize that inner voice more quickly and follow it more confidently. Your heart was never meant to be a place of confusion or fear. It was meant to be a sanctuary, a sacred space where God's gentle presence speaks to you, calms you, and gives you direction. And the more you listen, the more familiar that voice will become. What feels uncertain at first will begin to feel like home, a steady, guiding light that you can rely on through every season of life. So today, wherever you find yourself on your journey, I encourage you to lean in and listen. Quiet the noise around you. Trust that gentle voice stirring in your heart. Trust that God has not left you without guidance. Trust that He is leading you toward a life filled with purpose, peace, and authenticity. And as you do, may you discover the joy that comes from living true to yourself and close to the one who loves you most. May you find the courage to follow that voice, wherever it may lead, knowing that when you trust the voice within your heart, you will never truly walk alone.